going to start it now. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to finally another episode of True Story Live. For those of you listening for the first time, my name is Jason. Glad to be here, and I will introduce everyone else in just a moment. First, I want to apologize for us being gone for so long. Jen and I both were sick, and we had to postpone several times, and it's not our favorite thing. We like to be consistent and continue to broadcast it just right up until the last minute. Last Sunday, we had intended on following through, but me personally, I was still not feeling right. And me being the host, when I do the broadcast, I want to be fully here and engaged and things like that. And I felt like I couldn't do it. So I'm the one that called it off. So everybody can blame me. that's okay. It's my fault. The other times, both of us were not feeling well, and but fortunately, we are both back to normal now.
Woohoo!
And feeling good, and definitely ready to get into this topic tonight. Circle back to love. This year's loving, and we will get to that in just a moment. First, I will say hello to the rest of the panel. Starting with our producer and our friend from Australia, Glenn. Glenn, say hello to the peoples.
Yeah, howdy. I just picked up something. You said you two are back to normal. I'm just sort of querying in my head, have you two ever been normal? That
Definitely
requires
not.
contemplation.
Probably not. Probably not.
We could do a whole show on that, guys. Just kidding.
Normal.
Oh, it's so good to be back. So good to
Yeah,
be back
it really is.
with the banter and the love and support. It's good stuff.
Yes, it's good.
And Janet's stoked up on the caffeine and probably a lot of other things as well. So I've got to be careful.
Janet's caffeine.
Hi, Janet.
Oh, her caffeine's called Kick Ass by Kicking Horse.
We're glad to have everyone in the chat, and we'll say hello to you guys in just a minute. Jen, if you could say hello to the peoples, thank you very much.
Yes. All right, we've got Janet. Janet was first in the queue.
Well, you say hello. You say hello first.
Oh,
and
me.
Then,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
you
Gotcha.
say
My
hello.
bad. I'm sorry. See, I'm a little rusty. I've got it all out of order.
That's okay.
Okay. Hi. I'm really rusty. Hey guys, great to be here tonight. Oh gosh, it's so nice to be back. I just really missed everybody
Yeah.
and missed hanging out and discussing stuff. And I would have much rather have been, doing that instead of feeling sick. That was not fun. So
It was
glad to be here,
not.
guys.
It was not fun.
No, it's
So
not.
briefly, we can talk about our symptoms because there's so we did not go to a hospital, and
No.
there's many reasons for that. And I don't feel like I have to go into the reasons why we didn't. But obviously, if we were in a place where we felt our life was in danger or anything like that, we would have bitten the bullet and gone through that process. But I am quite sure we had the C word that's been going around. And there were a lot of symptoms that made us both feel like that's indeed what it was.
Yeah.
I haven't talked a whole lot on this broadcast for good reason about my feelings on that, and I never said it didn't exist. I didn't say it was fake or anything like that. The only thing that I've ever said was that they were exaggerating the amount of cases, and that's still the way I feel. But we got it, and it made my teeth hurt, and it felt like my spinal column was hurting, and fever, on and off fever, and weird dreams, and the whole bit.
He said, "Say it, Crips."
Huh?
He said it's the word that will not be named, and then he said, "Say it, Crips."
Yeah, I can't say it. Yeah, because see, here's what happens if you even say the word. A lot of these, of course, our channel is not big enough really to get a whole lot of attention, to be honest. But some of the larger channels, you even say it. You say the VAX word or you say the C word, then they give you a copyright strike and cause problems and take your video
Yeah.
down. And it's unfortunate. I mean, that's a whole nother topic of how they're ruining freedom of speech and all that. But it's
Yeah.
happening. It just is.
Yeah. And Janet, yeah, Jason didn't, but I did lose my taste and smell for like 10 days. It was hell on earth.
Yeah,
Not to be overly dramatic, but I didn't really want to eat because I just didn't realize how much
yeah,
smell and taste is connected to eating. Like, you just don't want to eat if you can't taste or
yeah,
smell.
yeah. My taste and smell was dampened for sure, but
Yeah.
it didn't totally go away. I could still smell and taste things, but
Yeah. Every
um,
day I smelled my tea tree oil to see when it was going to start coming back, because tea
yeah,
tree oil is like really strong.
yeah.
And I'd be like, I couldn't smell it at all.
It has
I
a
was like,
really
oh my
good smell
gosh.
to it, which I love. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that the smell that has, and the lavender oil that you use, and all the different aromas.
Yeah.
All good stuff. So anyway, so when I say normal, I mean just for Glenn's benefit, specifically health wise. Health wise, we feel normal again. We're
Yeah.
back to normal. So that's good. All right. So you started to say hello to the people in the chat. So let's try that again. Maybe some more people came in. And does Annie have the link? Do I need to send the
If you
link?
want to just pop it into the messenger real quick while I say hi to the people, so that'd be great.
I will
Just in
do that.
case.
I will do that.
All right. So as I was saying earlier before I was so rudely interrupted, Janet was first in the queue. We've got gotta make my noises. Debbie S is here. Hey, Debbie. We have Stephanie that's here. Journey's Wake. Hey, Journey's Wake. And BB Truth just popped in a second ago. And I think that's, did I miss anybody? I think that's it for right now.
Well, there we go.
All right.
All right. So I popped the link in our three-way chat. And so that's there. If she comes in, she'll be able to see that. And it's good. Okay. We got that done. All right. All right, guys. So we're going to get started. And first of all, I want to thank everyone for being patient and for showing up tonight. I would have completely understood since we've been gone so long. It was like, didn't even believe that we were coming back. I mean, that certainly is a possibility, but here we are. We're glad to be back. And tonight's topic, Circle Back to Love. And we're going to hop into this topic. This year's Loving is the song, and I'll go into that in just a minute. All right. So I'm pulling up the old script here. All right. All right. What is love, and how important is it in our lives? What does love look like to you? For tonight's inspiration, give this one a listen from David Gray, This Year's Loving, and the link is in the description. The thought behind the title, Circle Back to Love, was a quote we got from Dr. John Deloney. This past week, on one of his call in shows, he was advising the mother of a teenage boy who was about to become a father. Here's the link if you'd like to give it a listen. The link is in the description. After giving her much encouragement, he ended the conversation with a suggestion. Instead of covering the situation and the young parents to be with guilt and shame for getting pregnant, quote, always circle back to love, unquote. It got us thinking about love and how when we were walking through life with other people we care about, how important it is if we circle everything back to love. A good example of this is when we were children and remembering how our parents disciplined us. There are many opinions about how discipline should look. Some people are fine with spanking, and others think a good timeout is a great way to get a child to behave. In each case, if love is not a factor in the discipline, then we are missing the main component on what discipline should have in order to raise a healthy child, being aware that they are loved. When I was a child and had done something wrong and needed to be punished, oftentimes there was no circling back to love, but there was the statement that once the punishment had been administered, it was over, and I could move forward knowing it did not hang over my head. I did not feel loved along with the discipline. Adding that would have been a better choice, in my opinion. Jen's story is even worse by my estimation. When she was disciplined, no one would ever come back and check on her or explain that the punishment was over, and certainly no circling back to love. She was left alone to wonder if she was loved and whether her parents were still mad at her. It seems like some parents use fear and intimidation rather than love to mold the child and get them to comply. Is fear and anger a better motivator than love? Why is that? Is fear and anger easier to put on someone than love? Is it a lack of people knowing how to use love as a tool? In any relationship, teacher to student, parent to child, boss to employer, husband and wife, is fear and intimidation a more widespread tool used than love, and why? We're not saying that love is just a tool, but in showing love in marriages, for example, how easy is it to get your spouse to do something you'd like them to do if they know it's out of love? The point is that making sure every person knows that they are loved is key and works way better than control and intimidation. What does it look like to not circle back to love for someone else? What has it looked like and how has it felt for you with someone who hasn't circled back to love? How does it feel to you when a person does circle back to love? Do you feel in the relationship you are in? Do you feel loved in the relationship you are in? What difference would it make if love were a major part of the equation rather than other techniques like anger? What does circling back to love look like with ourselves? The saying, we can be our own worst critic, is very true. I wonder why this is. Is this something we are taught? Many of us extend love to others easily, but when it comes to loving ourselves, which can take many different shapes, it seems harder to do. How much better would we be as people if we circled back to love with ourselves? All right. Well, there we go. That's the topic tonight that we're going to get into, and we'll get into the questions. And as usual, if anyone has any comments, please be kind enough to put them in the chat. And of course, we will be more than happy to bring them up if you want us to talk about it. And it's always easier to see if you put them all in caps, or you can use the at symbol and put True Story Live in there if it's addressed to me or to Jen or to Glenn, either way. And we'll be happy to share those things.
And I don't know if you were busy reading, Jason, so I don't think you saw. Glenn got a message saying that the stream was going to end soon.
Oh, okay. All right. So let me just say the program, and we've run into this before, but it's been a long time. We haven't had to mess with it in a while. So when they changed Google over to the Google Meet, now apparently they want to charge people to use the program that we use to do the broadcast. So we generally have an hour that we can use it, and then we will have to cancel out of that and start up a new one. So how that affects the broadcast is we can leave the broadcast running, but at some point we're going to have to take a few minutes and switch over to another chat. I mean, your chat that you guys are in will be fine. It won't be affected there. In fact, you guys can just talk to each other. But I wanted to let you know there will be a moment coming soon where it will be silent for a brief time while Glenn gets the other chat set up, and then we will resume where we left off. So I'm sorry about the inconvenience. As I said, this just came up when Glenn was setting up today, and we haven't found a workaround yet. So what we're avoiding is it's a monthly charge to use the chat, and we don't make any money from this broadcast. Obviously, we don't have it monetized or anything. So us paying to be able to do the broadcast is not our first choice. um, so while we try to figure out what we're going to do to get around this is just the way that it is. So I apologize again that there will be a brief silence, but we'll get through it and hopefully be able to continue the broadcast where we left off, and we'll go from there. one more thing I'll say is that this had happened when we were having all those technical issues a couple months back, I think it was, and we stopped looking for an alternate because it stopped happening. It stopped requiring. It didn't give us the error message that we need to purchase more time. It was allowing us to do the full 2 hour broadcast, and now it's not doing that anymore. So I don't know. I don't know what other people do. I don't know. We had even talked about switching to what was it, Duckyard or whatever. I forget what other
StreamYard.
StreamYard. That's what Duckyard. It's a duck
You're thinking
symbol.
DuckDuckGo. That's funny.
That's right. That's right. So it is what it is, and we'll figure something out. But for tonight, it'll just mean a brief pause. And
Well, intermission. If only we could play some music while it was paused, that'd be great.
yeah, that'd be fantastic. If we were still on Blog Talk, I could easily do that. I could
Yeah.
play a song in the middle of it. I even had intro music for True Story Live at the beginning. I hear that in my head sometimes, that intro music for Blog Talk.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah. And
Blast from the past.
And then on Christmas, we did one Christmas episode of True Story Live where we played Christmas songs. You remember that?
I do.
Yeah. That was fun.
That was fun.
All right. Anyway, Glenn, do we know how much time we have left before we're going to have to make the switch? Is this a good time to do it, or do we have more time?
It said we only had 45 minutes, and that is coming up in about a minute and a half. But look, I don't trust Google, to be honest. I want to see them actually cut us off before I do anything. I'm not going to be preemptive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. That's
Thank
great.
you for that. Okay. So with what I said, guys, what'll happen is if you're not able to hear us anymore, then that means they've cut us off, and we will be working quickly to get it set back up again so we can have another hour. So we'll just continue, and we'll see how far we get. All right. So the first question of the night is, what is love and how important is it in our lives? Now, we've asked this question on broadcast before. Of course, Glenn was kind enough to point that out, that we've talked about this definition of love. However, I feel like it's not an easy thing to define what love is, for sure.
Because it's like different for different people.
Yeah, it's different for different people, and it depends on what kind of love you're talking about. There's romantic love, there's friendship love, there's family love, there's all kinds of different types of love. So, in asking this question, we're not trying to define all these different types of love. I think that the question just asks, what is love and how important is it in our lives? So we'll put Jen on the spot first.
Oh, jeez.
in terms of the write up and what we're trying to talk about in circling back to love, in those parameters. What is love to you, and how important is it in our lives or your life, Jen?
I think it's incredibly important, and I think it has the potential to make or break connection and relationships.
Wow. See, you were,
I was primed and ready to go.
You were primed and ready to go. That's beautiful. I don't think I can do better than that answer. I'll just say I agree with you, and I'll add to that love is extremely important to me, and all the different kinds that I suggested. I have friends that my love for them is important. I have family members, and that kind of love is important. Obviously, you guys have heard me talk about my marriage to Jen and how important that love is. That I hate to rate them, but I would say that that's the most important to me, and I think that's okay. It's okay to hold that love up a little bit higher than other types of love, but it's extremely important. I don't know what I would do without it, to be completely honest, and I still remember times in my life. I mean, I had the family love and the friendship love, but I didn't have this type of love in my life at all. And my life is forever changed because of it. I even think, God forbid, something would happen to Jen or anything like that. But because of her, my life will still never be the same. I don't want to be without her, but that love I feel like will be enduring.
Yeah.
It will continue to change me because I had the pleasure to be able to experience it. Um, if I had my way, both of us would live a very long time. And um, when this particular journey is over, I would hope in some way that it'd be like the Notebook when the two main characters, they crawl into bed and they both pass on together at the same time. That'd be fantastic. It's a good way to go. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen like that. And speaking of the love of my grandparents, just briefly, my grandparents, they had been married for over 70 years together. And my grandfather, who was 94 when he died, and my grandma followed a year later, almost to the day. Um, it was a little like a year and a month from the time
Wow.
he died, and she went to go be with him. So, um, and she wasn't the same. Uh, she had been declining a little bit mentally, and they took care of each other. So when he died, she really declined quickly, um, to the point of not being able to take care of her. And she was in a home, a very nice home, for a brief time.
Yeah.
But she wasn't the same. I went and visited her, and fortunately, the time that I saw her a few months before she passed, she remembered me right
Ah.
away. She was in a wheelchair, and she was sitting in kind of the hallway, and I went to go visit her, and I walked in. I had my sunglasses on, and I walked up to her, and she looked up and she says, "Are you Jason?" I said, "Yeah, Grandma, you remembered me. That's awesome." So that was a good experience because there had been other people. Sometimes her son Denny would go visit her, and she didn't recognize him. So I was just very blessed that the last time I saw her, she did remember me. And I went and visited her when I was in Michigan. I'd visited her a couple times. But anyway, that love, that family love, the love I had for my grandparents, the love they had for each other, it's extremely important. And I think it forges us as people. It changes who we are as people. So it's extremely important. Glenn, what do you think about this one? What is love, and how important is it in your life?
Oh, please excuse me. I've been concentrating more on what's going to happen rather than what you're saying. So,
That's okay.
but what I did here on this play, ask the question again, please.
Sure. What is love, and how important is it in your life?
Oh, who knows what love is? My goodness. But
Right.
I think I've answered this question before. But the thing I thought of when I heard you say about yourself and Jen, I got to throw it back to you guys because I know how I would deal with this. How do you think you'd deal with it if either one of you died today? How do you think what do you think your life would look like tomorrow? I know it
I'll
requires
I'll answer that.
speculation, but
Well, that's a great question, Glenn, because I actually think about. I think it would
We
be,
both do when we talk about it.
yeah. It would be weird to not think about that because here again, as I just said a few minutes ago, I remember what it was like to not have Jen because I heard a beep. Was that?
I think uh
it says we've got 10 minutes.
oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So everyone can still hear us. All right. Great. Um, I remember what it was like to not have Jen, and I don't want to ever go back to that. Now, as I just stated, I feel like it would be different than as if I'd never experienced it, both in good ways and in bad ways. In the good way, the love that Jen has showed me for whatever period of time, like Glenn, in your question, you're saying if she died tonight, I know the way I perceive it is that I would not be okay for a while. I just that's how I feel. I feel like I would be grieving. It would be a terrible loss, and not having her around and all that. I mean, just I can feel, even as I'm talking about it, I can feel the emotions of it. Um, it would not be good. Now I'm thinking more highly of myself than I ought to probably, but I feel like I would not get over it. Um, for instance, the people that I've lost, my grandpa, my grandma, my other grandpa, well, both, all of them. So all my grandparents are gone now, but I felt differently about each one of them. I've never gotten over them being gone. That hasn't happened. I've just gotten used to them being gone in other ways. But like my mom, for instance, who I was very close to, I'm not over her dying. I just have gotten used to her absence more and more. So with Jen, I believe it would take a long time. I mean, we've only known each other for, I think, 4 years or so. But the impact that she's had in my life is staggering to me. Um, so hopefully I would be okay after a while, but initially it would not be good. That's the way I see it. Now I used to think that about my mother too, but it was a different relationship. I Before she actually died, I used to imagine it sometimes from time to time, and I thought I would just be devastated. And in a way, I was devastated, but I handled it way better in the situation when it really happened. Um, so hopefully that would be the case if something happened with Jen. Um, it would be devastating. I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah. I feel like I would be forever changed by losing you, but I also would be ever forever changed by knowing you.
Well, that was way better than what I said.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. You can say things better than me. That's okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I'm just
Oh
kidding.
yeah.
Um, I'm just being silly. Yeah, I know I would go on and be okay, but then again, not be okay. I think about I have a friend that lives out in California and she lost her daughter who was like 22, 21 or 22, like a year and a half ago. And I think sometimes when I think about, I can only wrap my mind around that kind of a situation so much because I'm not a mom. But I can imagine that there would be a part of you that's never going to be okay again, when you lose a child or anyone that you love. But at the same time, there's a part of you, if you're going to push on and live life and remember them and keep them alive through the memories and through the good times and through how knowing them changed you, um, that that part of you can be okay. But it just, death changes you, losing people changes you.
Yeah. That's good. That's very good. Glenn said in the chat, where did that come from, Jen? Nice.
I have no idea. I have some nuggets every once in a while.
She does. She's got a fantastic brain and wow. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so back to you, Glenn. Do you wanna answer that? Because you just really didn't answer it. You just kind of turned it over to us and didn't really answer the question. Do you care to try to answer the question now?
I'll try. Oh, it says you call in 6 minutes. I'm preoccupied. I'll answer the I'll answer the question as I asked you
Okay.
with Sandra.
Okay.
I'm probably more pragmatic, and that may be in some ways because she's been seriously ill for quite a time. So you're sort of already gone through part of the process of if 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 you want to call it losing someone or losing a part of them. And
Mhm.
I think, does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, it
Because
does.
your relationship and you as an individual you must change and adapt. Otherwise, you are not going to make it.
Yeah.
So, I think I'd be pretty okay. I would tend to look and say, "Oh my goodness, I've just been so privileged to get whatever time I got. I just have to do what I have to do, and just
Yeah.
although it would not saying it would be easy, but I think I'd cope quite readily. And I also, other than the fact that Sandra needs my assistance on a day-to-day basis. I think if she was not like that, she doesn't need me, and I don't need her. So therefore, I think we'd cope.
Yeah.
But that's way easier to speculate on than have to deal with it in the real world. And to be
Good
honest,
point.
I can't tell you. I may be an absolute mess that can't get off the ground for a month. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
Yeah.
think so, but it might be. I can't know. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's wise to say it like that. Like when I was answering the question, I was saying I was thinking more highly of myself than I should probably, in saying that I would be okay, because I'm not sure that I would. I feel like I wouldn't be okay with it. I mean, there's a part of me that knows that I wouldn't be okay with it. Um, and she's just so much a part of my daily life now, and the joy that she brings just being there. I mean, not even everything that she does, just being there, just having her to cuddle with and come to bed with and watch movies with and talk to, and just all the things that we do, to for those things to be gone, not accessible anymore except in my memory. It's a terrible thought. It just really is. And death is terrible.
But the
It,
other thing is, Cripps, like no one can take away what you've experienced. That's the positive.
yeah,
There's a huge amount here to be thankful for with it that some people never experience that kind of connectedness with another person. So
that is true.
I'm thinking we're going okay.
That is true. Okay. Thank you.
Now we have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. In the 3 minutes that we have, I want to welcome Tiptoe Palms to the broadcast. And everyone who's here, please welcome her. She is a friend to Glenn and Jen and myself. And we have been having conversations with her in the three-way Facebook Messenger, and she's a delightful person, and I'm sure everyone will enjoy getting to know her. So we welcome you. I'm glad that you're here. Very glad that you saw the link and were able to come and listen, because we've been talking, I think, almost for the past three. Well, Jen had met her first, but while we've been sick, we kept postponing the broadcast, and I think she listened to one of the broadcasts at some point, and we were was looking forward to being in the chat and being able to hear it live, and so we kept postponing it. And I think even last week she was like excited to listen and stuff, and then we postponed it, or I postponed it again, and then so that was disappointing. But here we are. So welcome, Annie, and I hope everyone else makes you feel welcome as well. So thank you. All right. Okay, so supposedly we only have a couple of minutes, and we'll switch over to the chat. There might be a brief silence, and then we'll be back. The stream will continue to run. It'll just be silent for a minute, and then hopefully, if all goes well, we'll come back. If that doesn't work, if that doesn't, not pineapple, if that doesn't work, then we'll figure out what to do from there. So,
Okay.
thank
So
you for your,
hang in there, guys.
yeah, thank you for your patience.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, just talk on the chat and all that. And, okay, so
Oh, it's about the end. We're going. Bye, guys.
Can anyone hear me? Hello, hello.
Hey,
Chris,
hey.
your icon's missing,
All right.
and I'm roboting, so that means to say something's happening.
Okay.
Okay, turn that off. Okay, now I've got to do something else. I've got to get this. Go down to this. I've got to actually get the link to the meeting going.
Okay.
Janice and Glenn, well, it's nice to go down with friends.
Oh, crikey! Are we being heard, Crips? We probably
I don't
are.
know.
I better not use bad language.
Oh, we hear you. Yeah, don't use bad. Okay, good.
Drop a couple F-bombs. No.
Fantastic.
Ouch.
You're all clear, Janet says. Okay, well, that didn't go as bad as we thought it would. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's try
that was a
this
lot
one.
faster than I thought.
All right. That was faster.
Well, I'm not up on the screen yet. I've got to put the chat back.
All right.
Let's see. Go.
All right. Well, we got past them on that one. Stupid Google Meet and their charges and whatnot.
Now the question is, can other people hear us?
They say they can.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that's lucky. We didn't invoke the Aussie vocabulary.
Yeah, that is lucky.
Strike.
Isn't that lucky? Right.
No, your accent. I don't know if the algorithm would pick it up. I'm just kidding. Maybe it would.
Welcome, Joel. Joel, say hello to Tiptoe Palms. That's a friend of ours that she's new to the broadcast, or at least new to the chat, because we haven't been on in the past 3 weeks. So
4 weeks, actually, because the one
4
weekend
weeks.
your grandma passed.
Yes, my grandma. Yeah, that's right. That is correct. So it's been over a month. Wow. All right, there we go.
You guys are troopers coming back to hang out with us.
Yep. All right, so we'll dive right back into it. Before we get back to the questions, I just want to say this link that we've added in the chat, the song and the Dr. John Deloney, that is a very good show. It's just very, very entertaining, and also I think that he has some good opinions and he tackles lots of good subjects. If you're into that sort of thing, you can visit, just click on the link, and then you can, like and subscribe or whatever you want to do with that. But he has a lot of different broadcasts that some people might be interested in. So go over and give that a listen. The one that we put the link for is particularly good, in my opinion. And it, again, it's this topic of always circling back to love. And so that's what he's saying. And we kind of went over the example a little bit. But it's basically, it's whatever's going on in whatever relationship is making sure the person knows that you love them. So circling back to love is extremely important. And this might come up naturally, but when we were going to do the broadcast last week, Glenn made a good point. He was like, well, if you really love the person, and I'm paraphrasing his comment, if you really love the person and if you're engaged in that relationship in love, you shouldn't have to circle back to anything. And I agree with that. Well, sure. Yeah. If you're always loving to the person, you don't have to circle back. You're just already there. So there wouldn't be any need to come back around. And I made the point that a lot of people maybe don't know how to do that, or maybe they love the person. And I used the example of my father, who would say that he loved my mother, but my mother didn't feel loved by him because he loved in a way that was not meaningful to her. So my point was, did my dad love her? He would say that he did. He would say that. He would say, yes, I loved Linda. My mother, if you asked her, she would say, no, he didn't love me. He cared about other things more than me. And she would go on and on and on about it. So who's right? Is my mother right? Or is my dad right? my point in looking at that relationship, to use that as an example, is um, no matter how much my dad loved her, let's assume for the sake of argument that he did indeed love her. She didn't feel it. So whose responsibility is it then to
Hmm.
make sure that love is felt?
That's a
Is
great
it
question.
is it Linda's responsibility? You know, is she somehow flawed because she's unable to feel love? Because then there's a possibility of that. There's a possibility that she was too damaged to feel his love. If he was doing everything he could possibly do to show love to her and she was unable to feel it, then in that case, yes, it would be her fault. But that I don't believe that's the case. I believe that each person in a relationship, there may be a requirement to cater the way that you love so that they're able to feel it. Now, fortunately, with Jen, I don't have to cater anything. And my guess would be with Glenn, he would say that he doesn't have to cater anything to love Sandra either. But that's not every relationship. It doesn't apply to every relationship. Sometimes you're going to have differences between two people, and it's not as natural, not as easy to love the person fully from an authentic place. That's just my opinion. So does that mean that, well, I'm not going to change anything? I'm not going to cater to someone else. For example, my dad showed love by fixing things and building things. He loved with his hands. He loved by creating things and giving them to people and saying, "See, I made this for you. I spent labored hours over this wood, built you a shelf. That's how I show my love." Or your car broke down and I got underneath it for hours in the rain and I fixed your, replaced your battery, or I changed your oil and helped you get your car going again. That's how I show my love. Well, some people aren't going to feel love like that. They're saying, "Well, thanks for fixing my car. That's awesome." And the fact that you got down on your back underneath the vehicle in the rain, that's, incredible. Most people wouldn't do that. But I still don't feel loved by you. So I'm not expecting there to be an answer to that. It's just something for you guys to think about as we're going over this topic. So the next question is fear and anger a better motivator than love? Is fear and anger a better motivator than love? What do you think, Jen?
No, from my experience, it isn't. And I don't know exactly why. I probably should have thought of that before, like pulled that apart before the show. But really and truly, from my experience, it really hasn't. And later on in life, like within this relationship with you, um, and having it circle back to love, and having you approach me about things that in past relationships that I've had, like with my dad, who was very angry, and with my ex, who was very angry. It's the dynamic is so different.
Hmm.
And because it's like encapsulated in love, it's just so much easier. There's communication, there's
Yeah.
resolution,
Hmm.
there's adjusting that happens on both sides.
Hmm.
I mean, we get along incredibly well, so there's not a whole lot of like friction or things that
Right.
are off, kilter.
Right.
But I just can say from my experience, like when I was a kid and I would mess up and my dad would get really angry.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if other people have dealt with this, but I had anxiety from a really young age, and I do think a big part of it was to do with my dad and just his explosive anger that sometimes didn't make sense, the timing of it, and it would come out of nowhere and catch me off guard. So then I learned to be on edge, waiting for it to happen, not
Right.
knowing when. Um, but when I messed up, when I look back at my childhood, I feel like I kept making the same mistakes.
Right.
Like the things that seemed to make him mad, I kept doing. And it wasn't like I wasn't doing it on purpose. I know there are kids that do go that route.
Hmm.
But out of all the trying to be somebody that wouldn't make him angry, I really and truly kept making the same mistakes, or at
Right.
least kept making him angry, and it was both of those things.
Uh-huh.
So when I look at that, I think, um, no, I don't think it helped at all. And I
Right.
think it did more damage in a lot of areas surrounding that than it helped.
Agreed.
So
Yeah.
that's my answer.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
And I'm going to quote unquote circle back to a comment that Annie made in the chat here in a minute, but I want to get through this question and give everyone a chance to answer before I do that. So from my perspective, I first of all, Jen. I agree with everything that you said, and I can talk about fear and anger from both the perspective of my mother and my father, because they both had some of that or ruled with some of that. My mom, she was an angry person. She was I realize now that it's out of her brokenness. She was angry because she didn't feel loved, and she was angry that her childhood wasn't as good as it should have been. And I'm not saying she didn't have a reason to be angry, but she took that anger out on people in her life. Now, when she went into counseling and when she became a counselor, she constantly worked on not doing that. And her relationships improved as a result of that. But I'm just talking in generalities about my childhood. So I grew up with someone that, like Jen, not exactly the same situation, but I would do something that would piss her off. And she wasted no time making sure that I knew that she was pissed off. And a lot of times she didn't. She would be direct about it in a way. In other words, she would tell me, "You did this and this and this, and I'm not pleased about it." But it would go beyond that. I mentioned earlier the slamming of the cupboards and the doors. She would carry her anger out for a long period of time. And sometimes she would go to her room and slam the door. And then, of course, as a child, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've pissed off my mother. How long is she going to be angry? Is this going to drag out forever? Does she love me, et cetera, et cetera? So I was not motivated by that at all. In fact, when Jen and I started our relationship, I stated very clearly to her, very clearly and very directly. And I didn't know if she reacted like that or not, but I made sure that she knew that not only does that not motivate me, it makes me not want to react in a healthy way if someone is slamming cupboards and doors to show their anger toward me. I don't respond well to that at all because of how I grew up. So it doesn't motivate me. It doesn't make me want to work harder in the relationship. It doesn't show love to me. It really is a deterrent for me. Now, in the case of my father, he would do the same thing. So I worked for him. He had a trim carpentry business. I've talked about that before, but I'm not assuming everyone else has heard that. So I kept going back to this toxic relationship by working for my dad. And there's a lot of reasons why I did that. But I'll save that for another broadcast. I'll just say that I kept doing it, kept putting myself in an abusive situation. And if I didn't do everything exactly the way he wanted to do it, he expressed his anger, and he did it both by telling me he was angry and also by, like angrily grabbing stuff, and sometimes he would say, well, I'll just do it, I'll just do it. And by doing the job that I messed up and getting down on his hands and knees and nailing correctly a piece of baseboard, or it's just an example. I didn't see him do that and then thought to myself, oh, I'd better do better next time. It didn't motivate me at all. In fact, his acting out of anger in that way made me feel like he was immature. The proper way, in my opinion, to handle that situation is to say, hey, you know what? You didn't do this right. Here, let me show you. Let me show you the right way. And then show me the right way. I think I would have responded a lot better to that, especially in the area of that he was my father. His anger didn't make me feel loved or motivate me at all. And I can't think of one example where any relationship that I've been in, anger and fear is a better motivator than love. I can't think of one. So that's my long answer there. Glenn, what do you think? Is fear and anger a better motivator than love? What do you think?
Of course not. I remember your mother. She would. I'm not sure that she's that angry. I'd say, but definitely, as you said, reactive. Oh my goodness, reactive. Yeah, we both have to laugh at that one, eh?
Yeah, as I got older and grew up a little bit, I did laugh. And sometimes that made her even more angry.
Oh,
She would start slamming cupboards and doors. And
oh yeah.
I wasn't a kid anymore, so I would laugh and say, "You're acting ridiculous right now."
Yeah, well, I just can relate. I can so relate to this because yeah, she'd say to me, I've just, basically gone off the deep end and yada yada yada. Why aren't you angry? I'll say, well, why would I be? I'm not indulging that BS. Now go away and come back when you can talk properly.
Oh, Glenn, I wish I would have known you when I was a teenager.
Well, that's why I was just laughing. As you were saying it, I was just killing myself laughing in my head, thinking, "Oh my goodness, I can just see this in my head. It's such a clear picture."
Yeah. Well, good. Hopefully, the way I described it
It was
was part of it.
perfect. It was on the money.
It's good. Yeah.
No,
It doesn't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, well, exactly. How on earth is fear and anger going to be a motivator? Right? Unless I'm in a concentration camp or something in a very
I was just thinking that.
serious life-threatening situation where I may have to use it to survive.
Mhm.
In general terms, it just makes no sense.
Yeah. I think it can also be a motivator for a while. Like, I had 14 years being married to someone who was really angry and very particular and wanted things done his way. And when he would get angry, it would scare me. And it kind of conditioned me to, I was always in my head making these lists of what he liked and what he didn't like and what pissed him off and what didn't piss him off. But that, even in that, that was always shifting and changing. It was crazy
Mhm.
because I would feel like, damn, I finally have the list of rules down in my head, and then the game would change, and then I'd have to like erase things and rewrite things, and I got very exhausted.
Yeah.
So that it's interesting because I think it can be a motivator, not a healthy one.
Mm.
I don't think it can exact healthy, lasting change.
Wow.
Because when I compare it to my relationship with Jason, because we circle back to love, and it's even with us, it's not even like a circling back to love. There's
Right.
just always love there. It's always
Right.
constant and
Right.
present. To where I think it does make things easier. And one of the reasons is because it makes it safer.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with someone that's angry or two people that are angry, I think it creates a very volatile atmosphere, and it's just not safe. It just
Right.
doesn't feel safe.
Right.
So,
Great. Great answer. Okay.
oh, do you want to
So,
go back to what Tiptoe said?
yep. Yep. So I'm trying to find it in the chat here real quick. Just a moment. Love the people talking in the chat. But I have to go
Which
back.
is great. I think it's at 8 minutes and 43 seconds.
Um,
We're just,
okay. Well, I don't want to have there be silence, but I'm trying
I can
to.
read it if you want to see if it's the right one. She said,
Uh,
Jason, I think it's finding the language between the two people to make it speak. Is that the part that you
yep.
were?
Yep. That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yes. That's
And
it.
that is possible, but it has to be both people having that goal in mind and working toward it, right?
Exactly
Um,
right. That's
because
exactly what I
really and
was going to
truly,
say.
what if what if you had one Chinese person and one Spanish person that were married, and they're
Yeah.
like, well, I'm going to speak Chinese, well, I'm going to speak Spanish, and nobody
Mm.
budges.
Yeah. Well,
It's
that's a
like,
great example. Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about the language of love, but Jen, the example that you used, that's perfect. So it's like someone speaking a different language.
yeah,
That's really the point that I was trying to make in the illustration of using my dad and mother. Um, my mom didn't feel love because my dad was speaking another language. It was a foreign language to her. She spoke in the way that was meaningful to her, and how she showed love was by doing things for other people. Now, my mother was very codependent, at least initially. And so she would do all these things and she was giving up parts of herself. And then what she expected was people to realize that. And she wanted to be recognized for that, which is
yeah,
natural. If someone
hmm
does a bunch of stuff for someone else, it's natural to want to be recognized for that, or to think that because I'm doing all these things, that's going to show this person that I love them and they're going to return the favor. They're going to love me in the way that I need to be loved. And unfortunately, at least in the situation with my mom and dad, that did not work. And that's the
Yeah.
point. The point is that they were speaking two different languages, and the languages that were being spoken didn't get the job done.
Yeah.
So that's the point. It's to me, it's not a question of whether there's love or not. I mean, like I said, for the sake of argument, we can say that my dad did love my mom. Let's just say that that's true. The point is that she didn't feel it. So we're back to the same question: whose job
Yeah.
is it then? Whose job is it to make sure that the other person feels love? Now, what Jen you're saying with us, we don't have to worry about that because there's love inherent in the relationship, and that's kind of what Glenn is saying. He says, I agree, for love to flourish you need to be on the love wavelength. Okay, yeah, so that would be in my mind the same love wavelength, and that may take work for some people like Jen and myself. Fortunately, for us, it doesn't take a lot of work. It doesn't take any work. It's just who we are as people. But my guess is that not every relationship is like that. A lot of people, you hear the term opposites attract, at least at first. So someone's completely different than you, and that might be attractive at first, but then later, the very things that you were attracted to about the person are the very things that irritate you. Jen and I have talked about that a number of times.
Yeah.
So what do you do then? So you're attracted to someone initially that you're the opposite. They do things differently than you, but then later down the road, those things irritate the what out of you. So what do you do then? So I contend, first of all, that the opposites attract thing is not accurate. That's just my opinion. Um, Jen and I aren't exactly the same person. It's okay to have some differences, but going into the relationship with the decision right from the get go to be direct and authentic and open and honest with each other from the start, I believe is the key to success in a relationship. That way, when you love the other person, you don't ever have to circle back to it, like Glenn's saying. You don't have to circle back to anything. You're in it. You're on the same wavelength. You're agreeing to love the person from an authentic place. There's
Yeah.
no need to circle back. But I know just from viewing other relationships that people have with one another, that's not always the case.
Yeah.
So, in those terms, that's the name of the topic that we're talking about tonight, is circling back to love. It's not assuming that everyone has this same love wavelength, that they don't have to remember to circle back, or that they don't need to figure out what the other person's quote unquote love language is.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to do that. Are you willing to do it, is the question. Are you willing to work with the other person to figure out how they feel loved and be willing to do that?
Yeah. Because some people get stuck in a relationship where, and I don't know if your dad was in this position where it's like, well, I'm loving you this way because this is what I'm good at and this is
Mhm.
my language.
Right,
So you either accept it or you don't.
right.
You either
That's
feel
his
the love that I'm
attitude.
giving out or you don't.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
That's his attitude. And because of that, he lost her twice.
Yeah.
And I'm
But
not.
hey, Chris, why are you saying it's about losing someone?
What?
Well, what did you? Well, your dad said, "Well, this is me. Take me as I am. If you don't like it, piss off." So, what's the
Well,
problem with that?
he didn't. What's the problem with that? Well, if he wanted to be in a relationship with someone, then that's the wrong attitude to have.
But that's
Well,
counterintuitive.
but
That's
we've
counterintuitive, isn't it? That sounds counterintuitive.
Oh,
That
To
means
you,
well,
to you, it's
that's saying to
counterintuitive.
your mum. That's your mum saying, "Hey, Val, I want you to change and give me what I want. Otherwise, it's not going to happen."
Well, she should have said that. Now that's her fault. Before getting back, this is just my opinion, but before getting back with him, and Jen and I were talking about this before the show. Before getting back with him, she should have said, "Here are my expectations. Whether you agree, Glenn, that it's right or wrong to give someone expectations, that's beside the point." She should have said, "Okay, I'm willing to get back with you for whatever reason. I'm feeling like God wants me to do this or whatever. I feel like we've always been married. I should have never gotten divorced in the first place because this is the way that I feel." Whatever. She should have set the expectations up right from the beginning. Been open and honest and direct and upfront and authentic by saying, Here's what I expect this time around. I didn't get this before, but here's what I expect now. Then at least my dad could have made the decision. Either he's willing to do that or he's not willing to do it. He could have then said, no, this is the way I express love. Either take it or leave it. And that could have been the end of it. And both of them could have avoided a lot of heartache
Yeah.
that came as a result of them trying to quote unquote be married again. So,
And I think this is where it gets sticky because some people go into a relationship in the beginning and they're expecting someone to change for them instead of seeing them as who they are.
right.
You know what I mean? But sometimes they're being deceived. Sometimes the person is presenting somebody that they're not. They're putting their best foot forward or they're putting forward a fake foot.
I love it. Put your fake foot
so
forward.
then you're like, and this is a whole other topic, but then the whole time you're with them after that fake persona goes away, you're always waiting for that person to come back when it was never real to begin with.
Right.
So
Right.
that's a whole other thing.
Now,
But I see where you're coming from, Glenn, and I see where you're coming from.
I want to make an example here, a really good one, because this is a true story.
okay.
This is to do with your mum, and she said to me, "Oh, I got back together with your dad," and I was in a place where I thought, "Oh, okay, we're back together now. He knows I don't like smoking. He's going to stop because he knows that I don't like it." Then she says, Paul, I can see it in my head. This is what she said. Oh, yeah, she said to me, I can just hear you laughing your head off that this is a joke.
Yeah.
And I said to her, you knew that Val wasn't going to give up smoking. So why were you deluded?
Setting herself up.
Well, she said it. She did it. It
Yeah.
wasn't about Val smoking. It was just that she was in denial.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the question, which I want to put on the table. Is
Right.
love a negotiation based on what you've been saying?
That's a great question. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, but
It really shouldn't be. Yeah.
Sometimes it is. That's I'm being pragmatic, to use your word. I'm trying to be realistic about the relationships people find themselves in. I agree with you, Glenn. It shouldn't be a negotiation. You should love someone or not love someone right at the beginning. That should be the way that it works. Either you're authentic with one another, you're loving, and that's just the way it is. You don't have to work for it. You don't have to negotiate. You don't have to make exceptions or compromises. But that's not the case. Obviously, we live in a world where there are these things that need to happen in order for two people to stay together. Otherwise, the divorce rate wouldn't be over 52%.
So
I mean, why are so sorry?
I'm sorry.
Why is divorce so prevalent? I mean that's a bigger topic, I suppose. But why are people getting married? Because obviously there's a reason why they get married in the first place. There's some reason other than arranged marriages. They look at each other and they say, hey, I want to spend the rest of my life with this person. So when it doesn't work out, what's the reason? Ultimately, in your opinion?
Well, I'm saying is, and agree or disagree, is that this is, you don't compromise your identity, but you work with the other person to reach compromises when you make decisions. That's way different. But you don't have to sacrifice yourself to fall into the lap of somebody else and be a lapdog.
I'm glad this is coming up. So I'm not suggesting that someone change themselves or sacrifice parts of themselves. That's what my mom did. That's a perfect point. So a codependent person does exactly that. They sacrifice parts of themselves and then they get mad about it later. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is if two people fall in love and they're going to get married, they should be realistic and upfront and authentic about their expectations from one another right from the beginning. Some people don't even know that. I'm not suggesting.
Yeah, I didn't.
Using my dad, for example. So he shows love by doing things. Okay. So that's let's take that for granted. That's the way that he is. So if Linda, when they originally met, would have said, okay, I see that this whole thing is ridiculous. People don't talk to each other like this generally. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that she said to him, I see that you express love to other people by doing things. So that's your quote unquote love language is acts of service. She says, my love language, and I know this about myself at age 20. I know this about myself that my love language um, is touch and you telling me that you love me. I'm not saying that's what it was, but let's just say that she says that. Then, if with that knowledge, Val could decide, okay, well, this is the way I want to show love. I don't know how to do it any differently, and he could have made the decision at that point. This isn't going to work. Or he could say, I will learn how to do this because I love you and I want to be with you. So if that means we're not necessarily asking him to change the core of who he is asking him to learn
A language.
a language that he doesn't speak. Now, Jen earlier used the example a Chinese person and a Spanish person getting married. That's the perfect example. So in practical terms, if those two people love each other, they have a decision to make. They don't speak the same language. So they're communicating, I guess, by looking at each other and they are attracted to one another and maybe hand gestures or whatever. Maybe they got an interpreter that's going on dates with them that's going back and forth so they can understand each other. Regardless, they have to decide how are they going to communicate in this marriage. If they love each other for whatever reason, how are they going to communicate? So either one person has to learn the other one's language, or both of them work on understanding enough of the other person's language so that they can communicate in some way. Is that compromising the core of who they are?
That's a good point.
And that's for you, Glenn. Is that compromising who the core of who they are by learning the other person's language? In the case that they don't speak the same language.
Would you mind just say that another way, please, if you can, or repeat it? I just need to think on it.
Sure. So we're using Jen's example of two people that one of them speaks Chinese and the other speaks Spanish. So I think that's the perfect example. So I'm saying in order for those two people to, they love each other. So that let's just take that for granted. They love each other for whatever reason. And they're wanting to spend the rest of their lives together. But the issue is they don't speak the same language. So I'm saying, is it sacrificing based on what you've said? Is it sacrificing the core of who they are for one or both of them to learn the other person's language so that they can communicate properly? So they can be married and have a love relationship and have the best chance because they're not just both speaking separate languages. They're learning part or all of the other person's language so they can communicate. Is that sacrificing the core of who they are by making those compromises or those changes?
I don't think it's sacrificing the core unless one person is willing to learn the other's language, but the second person says, no, I don't want to. I think once you can find a mutuality in this, that you go along with this together, no sacrifice. But I think don't you think it's out of balance if one's willing and the other one says, oh, I can't be bothered?
Absolutely. That's part of my whole point. But the only way you can decide that is if up front the two people know what it is that they want or need out of the relationship and they're open and honest about it. But that doesn't happen. So you get people that marry each other, they don't find out till later, hey, this is something I need and I'm not getting it. So then at that point, you're already married. And whatever point you realize what it is that you need, and you go to the other person, hopefully, and say, hey, I'm realizing that I need this. Are you willing to do it or not? That's not the way it happens. People just get angry and yell at each other, and then next thing you know, they're divorced.
See, I think this is yeah. I don't know why your mum keeps popping up here, but I think she's a really good. Oh yeah, I know. She sticks her oar in all the time, doesn't she? She will not go away.
That's even funnier because she had a canoe and she would take her canoe out on the lake and she'd stick her oar in the water and she'd just go canoeing on her
I
own.
love that saying. That's great.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, but this okay. You said that she and your dad weren't like aligned in what love meant to each of them.
Right.
I'd
That's
like
my opinion.
Okay, I'd like to take a really sort of general stab at what I think would have been different. or I don't know. I'll take a general stab at what I think she would have, the angle she would come from. Okay,
Uh-huh.
because I think it relates to sacrifice. She would say, "Oh, I want someone who will come with me on my journey, someone who'll engage with me,
Hmm.
someone who will demonstrate to me that they want to spend time with me." And I think for her, that is a demonstration of when someone's connected, is their willingness to just do have that level of engagement. That just out of the sheer desire to have the engagement. Now, if someone says, "Well, I'll fix your car for you," that
Right.
is not engagement, is it? In my
No,
humble opinion.
not at all. And I completely agree with what you're saying. So if if we move away from whether it's learning someone else's language, you're talking about each person being willing to engage in the relationship. If that's happening at the beginning of the relationship, they have a far better chance, in my opinion, than these other relationships that we're describing. If both people are willing to engage however they need to engage in the relationship in order to make it work, then you're starting off way better. And using my parents for example, that was not the case. My mother was very naive and she was codependent, and she came from a really, really horrible childhood where she was neglected and she was really the parent of her sibling because her mother didn't want to be a parent in the first place. She probably should have never had kids. I'm glad she did because I wouldn't be here. This particular version of myself would not exist.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, she had two kids. I'm speaking of my grandmother, and she didn't want to be a parent. So when my mother was old enough, she would say Brian was a problem child in that he was very emotional and he needed a lot of care. And my grandmother would say, "Go see what's wrong with Brian," and my mother would do it. So she was a surrogate mother for her brother. And that lasted up until the day that she died in some ways. And she worked on trying to break that relationship and change it. But it was something that followed her forever. Um, that's not her fault. I mean, it's her fault that she engaged it for so long. But it was a
She probably
situation.
didn't think she had a choice.
Right. She didn't have a choice. So I forgot why I even brought that up. But that
Um,
usually happen. I was going to make a point.
Sorry.
Oh, I remember. So when she met my dad, I was making the point that she was codependent and naive and had a bad childhood. That's how it started. And then so when she met my dad, she was taken aback by him and she fell in love with the performer part of him because he was a gospel singer and he was on stage ever since age 16. He was part of some group and singing as often as he could. And some of the groups he's in had a following fairly large for the Christian circles. And she saw him in a concert at the college they went to, and she was smitten with him for that reason. And when she went up to meet him, she met the performer side of my father, and that's what she fell in love with. And of course, at 20 years old, they get married. And then over time, like would happen with anybody, you start to see that that's not who he is. He's not the performer, he's something else.
This is what I went through.
Right. This happens to a lot of people.
It's
It's
like
not
bait
just,
and switch.
it's a bait and switch.
And it does happen to people that are naive. And I was like your mom. I was incredibly naive.
Right.
But not just naive, but I was sold a bill of goods that wasn't real.
Right.
Um,
Right.
we had, and I'll just be frank because I know there's believers on this part of my testimony, but we had normal sex before we got married. And I regret that, and God's forgiven me. But after we got married, there was really, sexual abuse that happened that was
Yeah.
not shared. Things that he wanted to do that wasn't shared
Hmm.
beforehand until after we were married. And we engaged in each other's likes when we were dating and when we were engaged. But as soon as we were married, it was like a switch had flipped. And, I wasn't allowed to, not that I wasn't allowed to hang out with family, but he discouraged it. He got
Right.
mad.
Right.
I started getting more and more isolated.
Hmm.
We never did anything that I liked to do, even though when we were dating and engaged, he went and did those things with me, like
Right.
taking photography and
Right.
doing all kinds of stuff. And so it gradually shifted, and I was like, where did this person go that
Hmm.
I was with in the beginning?
Yep.
And then I was met with this situation where he was demanding us to do more of what he wanted to do and how he felt loved and so on and so forth, while I was withering away because
Hmm.
we weren't doing anything. So that it ended up being this, like, he was coming at me with, we're not going fishing enough, and I feel like, I'm losing myself, and I'm over here like, we're not doing anything that I want to do, and it was just like this horrible shit show. Um so I can definitely relate with your mom. Yeah, sometimes it's just you're sold a bill of goods that isn't real,
Yeah.
and that's very unfortunate.
That is very unfortunate. Good point. I'll say
Yikes.
hello to John, my friend John Dons, who just popped in the chat, and I answered your question there. He's asking, was it the Envoys? It wasn't the Envoys. I forget what the name of his original group was when my mom met him. Now, once they got married, they started a group called the King's Quartet, and he was in the group for 6 or 7 years before joining the Envoys in the mid 70s. And then the Envoys are the incarnation that he's still involved with to this day. So that's what he's commonly known for, the Envoys. The King's Quartet was actually a pretty. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but the King's Quartet was actually in my estimation, a really good group, and it was in the mid '70s, so it was kind of a mix of gospel and like '60s/70s music. It was very very popular at the time, and but the group that he was in, and I don't know the name of it, but it was Phil Felton, which is his best friend that he's still in the Envoys with today, and two other gentlemen that I've heard their names, but I don't remember who they were. But I don't remember what the name of their little group was. But they were together while they were in the college. So hopefully that answers that. Before we move on, I saw, Glenn, that you wanted to address something that happened in the chat. Would you like to do that now?
Give me a tick. Yeah. Okay, I did address it, but I'll just go
Okay.
back and find it. Okay. Tiptoe said, I think that we need to know what we are going in with first. How can we be able to know how to negotiate if we don't know what we're willing to give? Which I think is a more than fair
Right.
question.
Yes. Yeah.
And I said, I think the first step is alignment of value systems.
Right.
I just
Right.
can't see how you can have a functional relationship if your values don't align.
Right. And I completely agree with your point.
Same
But
here.
in the case of my mom and dad, again, this is such a great example because their marriage was so dysfunctional. Um, they it appeared on the surface that they had similar value systems. So you have to define then what value systems means to you, because they were both quote unquote Christians. They both had similar beliefs in that area. They both said they wanted to have a family. Um, both of them didn't have like a huge criminal record and things like that. They weren't like thieves and drunks and drug users and things like that. So in that way, a lot of their values seem the same. So I'm making the point that yes, I agree with you, value system, but I still think it goes deeper than just the value system.
No, I said that's the precursor.
Right. Okay.
That is, well, isn't that isn't a shared value? Values are non-negotiable.
It should be. It absolutely should be. The same thing happened to me. So in my first marriage, going into it, I thought on paper that we had the similar values, but what it turned out to be was that I was devoted to the idea of marriage and was willing to do whatever I could to stay married. I was willing to compromise if needed in the relationship, not my core self, but I was willing to make changes as needed as part of the relationship, and the other person wasn't willing to do that. So it didn't work. So I guess the question that keeps coming up for me is needing to compromise important in a relationship? If your value system is supposedly the same, then what else is necessary? If that's the precursor, and I agree that it is, then should that be all that's necessary, or is there something else that's needed?
No, I think that's just one thing. I think
Yeah.
I think there's if we say, and it's difficult to just think in the moment, but I think there's a few things that are, I think it comes down to what are the non-negotiables? Let's look at those first.
Okay.
Then the if you have your non-negotiables and you're in alignment, I think the rest of it is obviously negotiable and can be worked
Right.
out just with
Right.
cooperation.
Hmm. Agreed.
But I think that you've critically got to define what you are not going to compromise. That's with upfront. Like, you know what I mean? You're not going to. If you, I'll get another example. If you are just so that you find smoking so abhorrent, the thought
Right.
that you couldn't be with a smoker, well, are you going to just suddenly say, "Oh yeah, I'll tolerate it because I like this person and they smoke, but really I hate it"?
Yeah.
No. Well, you've got to make a choice. Are you
Right.
prepared to negotiate? Is it negotiable or is it non-negotiable? You just keep
Right.
asking the questions.
Right.
But people don't do that. They rush in and sort of think, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll accept it." But no,
Right.
there's a point where you've got to say, no way, it's not happening.
Right. Right. And I'll use myself for an example. So again, my first marriage, we even went to premarital counseling, and some of these things came up before we got married, and I brought them up. I was as much as I could, as much as I understood of myself at the time. When I saw the things come up, I brought them up. I was direct. I was trying to be authentic, and I was saying, "Hey, these are non-negotiables for me." And I'll give you an example. She all the time, because of her anxiety and depression, was not showing up for things that we agreed to do together. And this wasn't one instance. This was happening again and again and again, and it made me feel like I wasn't important, and it was a huge red flag. Now, the person I am today, if I was in that situation and dating someone that was doing that very same thing to me, and I would be willing to do the premarital counseling. When this came up and I brought it up, and the person back then said, "Oh well, I hear you. I see that it's a problem. I recognize that it's a problem. I'll work on it in the marriage." And at the time, I said, "Okay, that's good enough for me." Now, today, that wouldn't be good enough because I've changed and I learned from that experience. So, someone saying, "Oh, I'll work on it during the marriage," no, that's not. You work on it now before I make a commitment to be your husband for the rest of my life, because that's important to me. To me, saying that is is crucial. I'm going to be with you, be with the person the rest of my life. My commitment to Jen is important to me. Now, it's not just about the commitment, it's about a lot more than that. But that means, I mean, they use in the vows sickness and health till death do us part. Those are in there for a reason. Those are in there for a reason because there are people that don't follow those. If one of them, and I know several examples, if one of the person gets in a car accident, they're paralyzed from the waist down, some people just split. Some people just say, "Hey, that's not enough for me." Their vows mean nothing. But I would say there's a fundamental problem right at the beginning, whether it's value system or whether it's refusal to agree on the non-negotiables, as you're saying, whatever it is, there's something that's missing at the beginning. If you're the type of person that's going to leave if something happens and the person's changed, or what if they get in a car accident, they're not paralyzed from the waist down, but the person's very beautiful at the beginning, and now her face is permanently scarred, and that's too much for you, and you leave. I mean, that's a problem. But getting back to my point, um, she said that she was going to work on these things that were coming up, and she ultimately did not. So I'm not the one that left. I'm grateful that she didn't want to continue the marriage, because I wouldn't have met Jen, and I wouldn't be with someone who is authentic and is willing to um, be engaged in the relationship. And that is a huge gift. But in my opinion, not a lot of people have that. They, as you said, Glenn, they jump into the relationship and nobody asks these questions that we're asking. Nobody says, hey, do we have the same value? I shouldn't say nobody. A lot of people don't say, hey, do we have the same value system? Are we both willing? Do we have the willingness that's necessary to be married? Are we willing to compromise? Not our core selves, but are we willing to make adjustments as needed so that both of us feel loved and appreciated?
Crips, we've got 10 minutes. And I just want to repeat something that I've said before, but I think it's really important. I think on the first meeting that I got together with Sandra, she said, you realise, I mean, obviously we were talking about a relationship before we hardly even met. But
Right.
she said, you realise that if each of us is not 100% authentic from the first moment,
Right.
this relationship is going to fail.
Right.
Because that lack of authenticity at the start is going to come back and it will break us.
Yeah.
I said 100%. I agree with it.
Right. Of course you do. So what we're saying is authenticity is, and we keep coming back around to this, and all these broadcasts keeps coming back around to that, is whether each person is authentic or not. Value system is important, don't get me wrong, but what it comes down to, if someone's authentic, even if their value system is a little off, does authenticity finish the job? Does it get it done?
I think so.
Good question. Well, I think isn't your authenticity in many respects intertwined with your value system?
I would think.
Yeah.
I would think it would be. I would think it would be. But if we're trying to get to the problem, get to the bottom line of why all these relationships fail, and what is the necessary tool, for lack of a better word, to help relationships work, what is that thing? And value systems is a good answer, but I can think of using my parents for example, at least on paper, and using myself as an example with my first not wife, my lease wife. On paper, the value system seemed to match, but what I found out was that it went way deeper than that.
The actions didn't.
The actions didn't match the on paper value system.
So it brings into light that watching actions is really important.
Yeah, and that's something.
Back up the words.
Exactly, Jen, and that's something Annie had mentioned earlier. I'm not going to go back up and try to find it, but paraphrasing what she said, she's basically saying that, that actions are necessary, or something to that effect, when we were talking about the subject before. So love is great, loving someone, value system and all that, but if there aren't actions to back up what's being said, you don't get very far.
Well, I agree with Stephanie. Here's what she said. Or you think you have the same values, but it's only because one had learned you so well, but was completely lying about it. Well, I'm sure that people can say, "Oh yeah, my values are the same as your values." I am, but the truth of it is, that's totally unauthentic.
Agreed.
It's got to get caught out.
Agreed.
It has to. It's going to fall over.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I was a marriage counselor and two people come into my office and let's say they're in their early 20s and they're just madly in love with each other, I mean, I would have a few things to say. And one of them would be about authenticity and about values, and making sure that it's not just on paper. I would tell two people that were thinking about getting married that they need to make absolutely sure that their value systems do indeed match, and it's not just on paper. Because I think we can all agree when two people quote unquote fall in love, the chemicals blind. I mean, the term love is blind is somewhat true in my opinion. If you're just going by how you feel about a person and you're not digging a little bit deeper, or at least waiting for the chemicals to die down before you make big decisions, then you can be making a huge mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, Jen and I talked about these chemicals because I was fully aware of them. I did studies on them because I'm completely fascinated by. And I told her this. I've always been fascinated by why these relationships don't work. I mean, to repeat myself, you have two people that quote unquote fall in love, and there's something they like about each other enough to, have a wedding and join themselves together and joint bank accounts and live in the same place, yada yada. So what is it that doesn't work? Why is divorce over 52% still to this day? That's been my question for a long time. So in trying to figure that out for myself and being in a relationship that's very important to me, some of these questions had to come up. And I was fully aware that when you meet someone and you first, start quote dating, these chemicals are present. So we wanted to move beyond that, realizing that the chemicals are probably not going to be in the same place the whole time. And then so we focused on deeper things. But I don't think everybody does that. I think sometimes it's just I'm so in love with this person and she's so in love with me, and they don't go beyond that.
Love conquers all.
Yeah, love conquers all. Yeah. Yeah, right.
And Glenn said words are cheap.
Words are cheap, unfortunately. I mean, it'd be great if everybody was a person of their word. So if they say I love you and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make this marriage work, uh, then there's no problem, I suppose. But
Yeah,
that, oh no, go ahead.
Glenn said a few spots above, forget what you think they want and just be who you are. Um, this opens up a whole other can because, if you are who you are and you're not so focused on what they want, then if they're not gonna like who you are, they may run for the hills. Because for me, I was used to twisting myself into a pretzel to be what I thought other people needed or wanted me to be.
Right,
Um, instead of just being authentically me,
right, right.
It's just interesting.
And now you're in a place where you can be whoever you are,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't need any pretzel twisting. I don't need that.
What do you
Okay.
guys want to do? We have 3 minutes. I was going to ask you guys if y'all wanted to continue this next week, or what do y'all want to do?
Well, we have a half an hour, so I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think about the time.
Oh, that's okay. We have a half an hour, so if both of you want to continue, then we can just do the chat thing again.
Yeah, I'd like to continue, Glenn.
Glenn?
Apologies, I was just preparing for cutout. What was that, Jen?
Oh, I was saying I wouldn't mind continuing if you guys are up for it.
No,
Yeah.
you please yourself. I'm going to switch this over when this falls over in 2 minutes.
Okay,
and,
2 minutes.
And see how it goes, eh?
Okay.
You call it how you see it.
Yeah.
Be yourself, Jen. Just, ask for what
Glenn.
you want.
I want to continue.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, so guys, again, and my apologies. So we're going to lose this particular chat again, and so we'll have to do the same thing we did before. So there'll be a brief moment of silence, and then we'll be back. It didn't take as long as we thought it would last time, and Glenn's already preparing for it. So we would be able to come back and be able to finish the episode. So. This has been fascinating. I mean, just to me, some of the questions that came up and this is what happens sometimes. We do a write up, and the write up may not may not seem all that deep or whatever, but because of the conversations that we have, we sure have drawn a lot out of it for sure. Things that I didn't even consider when looking at the write-up initially. So this has been really fascinating to me. Okay, so we probably don't have time to get through another question. So I'll just say the next question that we're going to ask is fear and anger easier to put on someone than love? All right. All right. Can everyone hear me? If someone could just say in the chat whether they can hear me, and we'll get right back into it once everyone comes back. Hello, hello.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I've got to turn this other one off. Just hear robot. Okay, where's Jen? I've just got to hook this up and we'll be going.
Okay, I don't know.
Okay, give me a minute. Oh, having two mice is a pain. Here we go.
I saw you put in the other chat. Maybe. Did you put it in both?
I'm ready. Okay, just hang fire. APD. We'll get this going. We're gonna go to the chat box. There's Jen. I'll get her in a sec.
Okay.
Let me just fix this one. Should we deny Jen admission? Yeah. No, maybe not. We're going.
All right.
All right, we're back. Okay, great. Everybody can hear us. Thank you guys. I appreciate your patience while we get this taken care of. All right, so right back into it because we're going to try to finish up on time. So we have 20 minutes, and it should be doable to get through it if we um, focus on the questions that remain. So the next question is fear and anger easier to put on someone than love? And I'll answer first. Is fear and anger easier to put on someone than love? I would say for the person that, as we're saying, a person that's doesn't have willingness, yeah, it's a lot easier for them because they don't know how to love. They, in my opinion, don't have the proper tools to love another person adequately or even well. So for them, it is easier to use fear and intimidation and things like that as a way to put it on someone in terms of the question, put it on someone. I think for some people, it's hard to love. They don't know how to do it. Or maybe they think they do, but they don't know how to express it in the way the other person feels it. That's my opinion. What do you think, Jen?
You stole my answer.
Okay.
I think there are people that their go-to is anger and intimidation.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, like when I was working at this after-school program, and I shared this with you a couple times, Crips, where when the kids were doing something bad, I, I found myself barking at them. Like that was my immediate reaction to get them to
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
And luckily they had some training with this particular job, and it's called Flip It, and it's a way to um, kind of like talk with the kid, get on their level,
Right.
validate their emotions, because
Right.
it's their emotions that are fueling their actions.
Right.
A lot of times with kids and people in general, there's other stuff going on behind the scenes and underneath the surface that's making them act or do a certain thing.
Sure.
And so addressing that is key. But then there are people that I guess have a lot of practice or get a lot of practice when it comes to to showing love and knowing that it's a better way of communicating and just getting your point across and getting behavior to change and all that stuff.
Yeah.
When you think about kids, but a lot of that goes back to how someone's raised. Like my dad being angry and yelling and stuff. He and I think I've shared this on the show before, but he grew up in a household where his dad was very strict and was like no emotion.
Right.
And his mom got polio when the five kids were very young, and I think it was very scary for the kids and for the dad, for my grandfather.
Yeah.
And he, I think, for his wife, because she was paralyzed, very sick, and they thought she was going to die. It was very scary. He sort of through, I don't even know if it was through intimidation. I think it was in some ways. I don't know exactly how, but the kids learned to live in this constant even keel where being loud and being happy, jovial kids wasn't okay
Right.
because it was going to disrupt their mom, but having sadness and anger and any of those emotions weren't okay either. So they had to kind of be zombies in a sense,
Right.
with no emotion. And so when my dad having grown up with that experience, I think when he got married and had kids, some of it was a reflection of what his dad did. But I also think when you spend a childhood full of stuffing your emotions because you're
Uh-huh.
not allowed to express yourself any kind of emotion. I think it can really, just come to the top and blow up.
Sure.
And with guys, as we know, just society, I don't know about Australia, but in the US, it just seems that they push this idea of anger is the only acceptable emotion that boys and men are allowed to have. Like if they're sensitive or cry, I mean, they're babies
Right.
or wussies or whatever, it's
Right.
just not taught that way. So,
Yeah. Good point. So before we ask Glenn, Stephanie says, from experience, yes, it's easier to show anger than love, especially when you want to push everyone away because you never learned how to truly love. It's exactly what I'm
it's a good
saying,
point.
and you're saying it in better words than I used, Stephanie. But that's exactly it. They don't have the tools, is what I said. But the way you phrased it, because they never learned how to truly love, that's the same point, said more eloquently. Thank you for that. All right, Glenn, what about you? Is fear and anger easier to put on someone than love? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I see Stephanie's point. I'm just going to come at it from a different angle to add
Okay.
something to the mix. Is I think if you're loving authentically, you're invested in it. So, but I don't think if you are going to be intimidating to another person, I don't think you take it that requires any investment. You can just be it,
Huh.
and I think that means that if to be put the fear and intimidation, in, that's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
are you saying that people
it's
that show,
way easier because
so
you're
you're
not
saying like,
invested in fear and intimidation, are you? You really invested in it to have to do it. I
hmm,
mean, we could do it at the drop of a hat. But if you're loving authentically, you're going to be thinking about this,
Yeah.
what you say, aren't you? You're going to consider carefully before you speak. Well, hopefully, anyway.
Sure.
So
that's a
yeah, I
great
think
point.
that's just
Sure.
that's the angle I'm coming from. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, I agree with it. And so what we're saying again, we come back to the same word, authenticity in the relationship to begin with. It's incredibly important. I
Investment, that's good.
Yeah, investment, and the other word is willingness. And I love that word. And I've talked about this before. It's something my sister said to me, and Jen and I were already in a relationship, and she had said about her relationship with her husband Kyle that willingness, they're both willing, and that has made a huge difference for each of them. And they're not really alike. I mean, they're, in my opinion, they're opposites, but they make it work. They've got four kids, and they ran a school together. I'm not saying their marriage is perfect by any stretch, but because of their willingness, they've gone through a lot and they've made it through. So willingness and authenticity seem to be important things. Certainly a better tool than intimidation,
Yeah.
anger, intimidation. Okay, moving on. After that question, is fear and anger easier to put on someone than love? Is Is it a lack of people knowing how to use love as a tool? I think that's a great question. Um, and again, I go on to explain that we're not saying love is just a tool. I'm just saying, in terms of relationships, is it a lack of people knowing how to love? And I'll answer first, yes. Yes. Now, using Glenn's point, if you're authentic, is knowing how to love a part of being authentic? Um, that's arguable, in my opinion. You can be authentic and maybe not necessarily know how to love, but again, with being a person that's authentic, you learn. I mean, I'm okay with someone learning how to love if they don't know how, but they have to have the willingness. They have to be willing to learn what you don't understand or what you don't know. And some people are, and some people aren't, in my opinion. What do you think, Jen? Is it the lack of people knowing how to use love as a tool?
I think some of it is. Um, I think some people just don't care about love. They like control and they like using anger and intimidation to do it.
Well, boom. There it is. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I agree with your point too.
Oh, sure,
I
sure.
think a big part of it, yeah.
But what you're saying is there are people out there that they don't care about the love. They want the fear and intimidation and control. It's about
Yeah.
controlling someone, not about loving them.
Yes,
That's
sir.
that's a really good point. So on all these broadcasts, when we talk about narcissism, that's at the core of that. You don't care about the other person. You don't love the other person. You have no interest in using love for anything. It's about having someone that you can control. You can get them to be your servant.
Hmm.
Now, my dad did that in some ways. Uh, he would have loved to have been able to control his wife and control his children. And while my mother was in her codependency, for the most part, I mean, she's told me stories where there were some times that she didn't just do what she was told and she reacted to things and that caused problems. Um, while she was in her codependency, that marriage in my dad's eyes worked. In fact, when she came to him when I was in my early 20s, so it was 22 years of marriage around right around in there. And my mom came to him and said, "This isn't working. I'm out of here." I mean, that's really what happened. I know they did do some initial counseling and things like that for a while, but my dad was very unwilling to do what needed to be done. What he tried to do was buy her flowers and do all that quote unquote lovey dovey stuff that men are told will work, and none of that worked for her because that wasn't what she wanted or needed.
Yeah.
Um, but she just basically said, "I'm out of here." So that obviously didn't work. But he had realized all of a sudden, and he was completely unaware that when he had control for all these years, that was over. And I can tell you, he didn't like that at all. And I'll just make a quick point here too. Um, he loved my sister because she was a compliant child, where I, on the other hand, was not. I did not buy into the control. I'm not saying that there were never times when I allowed him to control me. There were. But the reason he and I butted heads was because I wasn't going to be someone, I didn't want to be someone to be controlled. And
Yeah.
that caused problems too. So, in any relationship, if one person wants control and they're not interested in love at all, and it's going to cause problems.
And then the other one doesn't care about control, but is more interested in love. It's an interesting mix.
Right.
Like,
Right.
ah.
So you have a narc on one hand and a codependent person on the other, and sometimes that can work for a long time unless the codependent person comes into self-realization, for lack of a better word. They realize that they're codependent and they start doing something to change it. And in my mother's case, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
She realized that who she was and what the basis of their relationship was, and then that was it. That was over. Okay. Did everyone answer that? Glenn, did you answer this? Is the lack of
Nope.
people? Please do. Is it
Yeah,
the
sure.
lack of people knowing how to use love as a tool?
I'm a bit uneasy with this question. Did you hear that coming? Did you?
Sure.
Uh, I just, it seems to be weird that how that's worded. How easy is it to get your spouse to do something? I just say ask for what you want. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Why would I want to get them to do something? I'm not. That sounds underhanded. I just say, look, son, this is what I want. What's your opinion? You say okay, or don't like it. Pretty all over.
Okay, just to be clear, so you went a little bit ahead. So the question that we're asking is in the idea of fear and anger and love, is it a lack of people knowing how to use love?
On my apologies. I'm yes, I was reading your yellow highlights down a fraction.
That's
Okay,
okay.
is it a lack of people knowing how to use love as a tool?
Maybe take the tool part out.
Yeah, I don't like that. That just sounds like your manipulation. Uh,
That's why I went on to explain that we're not just saying love is a tool, but that's further down. So just
okay.
forgive the use of the word tool and just read it. Is it a lack of people knowing how to love? Is that part of the issue that they don't
Well,
know how to love?
I think potentially that's correct because if people, I think the critical part of this one is that if people can't articulate what love is or what love represents, it's going to be it's impossible to go to the next step.
Right.
So I think
Gotcha.
really there's got to have been that inner sort of processing or whatever you want to call it, that you actually come to an understanding of what love represents
Right.
in your case. Yeah, that's how I'd answer it.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. Two comments from the chat. BB Truth says, I also notice people throw around the word love like it's nothing. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there are plenty of people that have no idea what love is, and then uh, no idea how to love another person. Um,
Yeah.
Now, there are people that want to, as Jen was saying, it's not about control, but I do believe that it does depend on how you were raised, and it depends on whether you were taught to love or not, or whether you yourself were loved. If you were loved by your parents, I would say it's a given that you get a sense of how to love someone else. If you weren't loved at all, then you can go into a relationship and not know how to do that. However, I personally have met people that weren't loved as a child. They had a very destructive, abusive childhood, but when they go into a relationship, they're completely loving. And again, to me, that goes back to the authenticity and the willingness as two factors. And I'll also throw in Glenn's um, value system as well. So those three things, if you have those right from the beginning, you have a good chance, in my opinion. Okay. In any relationship, teacher to student, parent to child, boss and employer, husband and wife, is fear and intimidation a more widespread tool used than love, and why? I think we kind of answered that. Do you guys think that we kind of answered the fear and intimidation?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then here's where I say we're not saying that love is just a tool, but in showing love in marriages, for example, how easy is it to get your spouse to do something you'd like them to do if they know it's out of love? Um, we'll toss that question as well. Um, I
I can
think
see where Glenn thought that was
yeah.
sounding manipulative.
Jen, instead of tossing the question, do you want to explain this question in a little bit different way? Do you think that's doable, or do you want to just move forward in the time that we have left?
Yeah, let me reword it. So when you're, gosh, I don't know if I can. Like when you're wanting to communicate and within a relationship, like we'll just use a marriage, for example. Well, I'll just use you and I for an example.
Yeah, please do.
When there is an atmosphere of love, it's not just easier to do things that you ask me to do.
Uh-huh.
I even find myself being compelled to do things without you even asking me.
You do, and I feel the
Um,
same thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that's the point that we were trying to make, because usually if when you don't have that kind of relationship and it's like the other kind that we've been talking about,
yeah,
I think sometimes it can disintegrate to the anger, resentment, bitterness, those
mhm,
things. You're trying to use those things to get the other person to change or to get the love that you want or to
right,
be understood or be seen or be heard, all these different things by the fear and intimidation and anger.
yeah,
Whereas if it's an atmosphere of love, it just works a lot better.
yeah.
I don't know if I did that justice, but
No, I think you did, and I'll just add to it real quick. So we're saying that I like how you said in an atmosphere of love, you're wanting to do things out of that rather than it being for any other reason like duty or I'm adding my own
yeah,
perspective to it. In my first marriage, and I realize now that what I had with her was not love, and I get that, but at the time I thought it was love on my part. And but I realized even then that I was doing things out of duty, mostly out of duty, and that was necessary for me to get by, because she required a lot of care with her anxiety and depression, and every day. It wasn't just occasionally; it was every day, and her inability to work or hold down a job. Um, all those things were present. Now, if there was love, if it was an atmosphere of love at that time, I don't feel like I would have done it out of duty. I would have done it because I felt loved and I loved her. But
yeah,
that wasn't the case. So it felt like when I did things, I was doing it because I am a decent guy, but it was out of duty that I did it, and not because of a great love that I had or felt.
yeah.
Hopefully, that adds to that. Um, Glenn, does that kind of allow you to answer the question from that perspective or not?
Yeah, I did. I just typed a comment in the chat. I was thinking what I heard you say was you do things for the other person without prompting,
Right.
just because you've taken the time to understand what's important to them.
That's it.
Beautiful. Spot
That's it.
on.
Beautiful. Okay. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ has something I want to add before we move forward. He says, for example, I most certainly know why people divorce. I think it's without question that people don't know what love is. They are very carnal and are self centered. Um, so for those of you that don't know what carnal, it just means from a spiritual perspective that they're living in their flesh. They're self-centered. They're living in their from a Christian perspective, their sinful nature. Uh, that's the term carnal in a short capsulized definition. Um, Whether you agree with that or not, I definitely agree with what he's saying. People don't know what love is. Yeah, I think that's true for the most part. And people are generally, in my opinion, self centered. Not everyone. Obviously, some people aren't. Um, Glenn's relationship with Sandra has nothing to do with being self centered. I can guarantee you that. And my relationship with Jen isn't about either of us being self centered. We're very other focused. Using her example of wanting to do things and thinking about it without me asking, and I do the same things. Um, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful and wonderful. And I wish everyone had that. I really, really do. BB Truth says love is unconditional. Well, it should be, but it doesn't seem like in every case it's like that. I wish it were. Okay, did everyone answer this one?
I think, yeah.
Okay. What does it look like to not circle back to love for someone else? What does it look like to not circle back to love for someone else,
I
Jen?
think, I guess we kind of touched on this, but I'll just share my example because I know
Okay.
you shared your example with childhood. So when my father would discipline, he would discipline pretty harshly and kind of scarily, if that's a word,
Scarily? Yeah, sure.
scarily, and leave us in our room. And like for me, I would just be crying forever and go to sleep. And there was never a follow up conversation.
Right.
So unfortunately, I was left wondering if he was still mad, if we were okay, if he
Mhm.
still loved me.
Right.
I felt like a bad kid instead of a kid just having done a bad thing.
Wow. Yeah,
And
that's
it
big.
just really, really shaped me in
Yeah.
a bad way. And my dad and mom have both recognized that it would have been a lot better if
Right.
if we could have sat down after the fact
Yeah.
and had a talk and
Right.
said, this is why I disciplined you. Part of why I
Right.
disciplined you is because I love you.
Right.
You're not a bad kid. You just did a bad thing. And,
Mhm.
or I told you to do something you didn't do, and that's disrespectful, or whatever the
Yeah.
conversation would be. Um, because it just, created anxiety. It created this idea of love is conditional.
Uh-huh.
Um, and not just that, but what's the other phrase? I can't think of it, but where you just you feel like yeah, like it's conditional, like it's like being loved by your parent is hinged on how well you do, or
Your behavior.
yeah,
Yeah.
behavior wise.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I was going to bring this up later, but this is a perfect segue. When you are operating out of love in a relationship, it creates safety. And I think that opens the door to communication and sharing and just the whole gamut. Whereas if you're always on it, the edge of your seat and anxious about a relationship ending, for example, like with me as a kid, it would have been me and my dad aren't okay. My
Mhm.
dad was and is very important to me.
Right.
You're always on edge and you're always anxious. And but if someone is bringing it back to love, it creates this safe place where I had a point and I completely forgot it. Do you know where I'm going with this,
Yeah, I think
Jason?
you're yeah, I think you're on top of, I think
No,
you're right
it's
on top.
gone. um,
You're
so,
you're saying right now, you're saying that if you know that you're loved, it creates an atmosphere of safety.
safety.
Yeah.
And that's also connected to being loved, like having a conversation, like say you have two people that are married and you're getting into a fight, for you to say to your spouse, okay, I'm angry,
Yeah.
and I know we're both upset, but I
Yeah.
want you to know, even though we're gonna hash it out, like, I'm not going anywhere. I love
Yeah.
you.
It's not the end of anything.
Yes, there it is, not the end
Yeah.
of anything.
Yeah.
It just opens up an easier way to communicate and share, and I think
Sure.
the sharing part is really important as well.
I think you said all that beautifully, and I for one understand everything that
Thank
you're saying.
you.
I understand the point that you made. So Jen, you answered both parts of this question. So the first part of the question was, what does it look like to not circle back to love? And then the next question was, what has it looked like, and how has it felt with you when someone hasn't circled back to love? So you
Yeah,
knocked those two out of the park.
great example.
Okay. So I'll go next. So, as I used in the write up, for me, I didn't feel loved when I was disciplined at all, but I had a little bit more explanation, like I explained that my dad generally was the one that did the main disciplining, and he would spank me, and he would leave me to cry for a while, and then he would come back into the room, and very rarely would he say, "I love you." At any time. But he would explain that, okay, I've punished you and now it's over. So I'm not mad at you. The punishment is not going to continue. I'm not holding any animosity or anything like that. Now, I would like to ask him this. He's still alive, so I could actually go back and ask him. I have no idea if he'll remember, but I have no idea where he got that from, because he wasn't a great parent. There were some things that he did well, but I have no idea how he knew to do that. I don't know. But that part was helpful. But
Yeah,
there wasn't a circling back to love, because, as Glenn said, there wasn't a really easy expression of love to begin with. So there wasn't any circling back to anything.
yeah,
It just wasn't there. And
yeah,
from my perspective, from my perception, now my dad would say, well, I put a roof over your head and I made sure that you had clothes and I made sure that you had food and I worked my butt off to make sure of all those things. And I put you into a private Christian school and I paid for that. And I did this and took you on trips and did all this stuff. So, of course, I loved you. But the thing is, I didn't feel love out of those things. I felt duty. You know,
Oh, that's interesting.
he was he was doing a duty to do those things, and I'm grateful for those things. I'm grateful that I had clothes and food and shelter. I mean, I know that not all kids have that. Some kids have none of that. Some kids have not no father at all, and if they
Yeah.
have a father, they're drunk or they're abusive or whatever. So I realize I need to be grateful for what I did have, and I am. But I didn't get what I needed, which was to feel loved and to know that I am loved, like Jen was saying. Jen was saying in her answer, if her father had come back and hugged her and said, "Okay, you did something wrong, that's why I had to punish you, and I love you, and that's why you were being punished."
Yeah.
That
And
would have,
that we're okay.
yeah, that we're
That
okay.
was a
That would have
biggie.
made a huge difference. Now, I will add, and you kind of alluded to it, Jen, that they're in a very different place now, at least than the place where when you have brought these things up from the past, they have taken responsibility for it and said, yeah, we could have done a way better job about that. And that is a huge gift because a lot of
Yeah.
parents won't even do that.
Yeah. Very true.
And I think that's great um, of them to do that. Uh, I also think it's great that you're willing to even bring that up, that you have the courage uh, after the fact. And it's part of your recovery and healing, in my opinion, to
Yeah.
go to them and say, here's what I've realized. I missed this, this, and this. And that you give them the opportunity to either say, well, that's ridiculous or whatever, or to take responsibility for it. And so far, it seems like they've chosen the latter of those.
Yeah.
Okay, Glenn, you're up, my friend. What does it look like to not circle back to love for someone else? And what has it looked like and how's it felt for you with someone who hasn't circled back to love?
Oh man, I can't come to grips with this question at all. um, but
Don't make me
it's
smack
like
you, Glenn.
I know the Earth is round, but I can't see the circle here.
Oh, he's
Uh,
poking.
yeah, that's right. He hasn't. Oh no, I got to leave that one. I'm going to replace it with BB Truth's question.
All right.
Oh, left field, tangential. Uh, can lust and sex turn into authentic love? There you go. There's one for you two.
Oh, you got to answer it since you didn't answer ours.
Yeah.
Oh, I was nearly going to say an Aussie word. I better be careful.
You could say it.
You got
Be
caught
your
in that one, didn't
be
you?
your authentic self,
Stepped right in
Glenn.
it.
No, I might
Stepped
get
right in
I
that
might get
one.
a strike. No, I can't
Roy.
answer your question, but
Oh
I
no,
thought
answer
I thought
BB's.
BB's was a good one. I wrote my
Answer,
reply on the.
answer BB's question.
I did. I said I can only tell you how I played it. I had a rule that I would not sleep with anyone who I was not emotionally connected with. So I was always trying to be authentic and putting the higher connection ahead of physical in importance. So with straight up sexual, I think the odds are not so high of going higher. Not impossible. Nothing is impossible. There you go. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think if you start out with just a sexual relationship, it's not impossible, but I think it's hard to have it be anything else. I don't think it just generally makes a smooth transition into a deeper kind of love if that's not what you started out with. I mean, and I would use the example of one night stands to back up my statement. So we all know about one night stands. We know that there are people that just quote unquote get with someone or hook up. I don't know what term the kids are using nowadays, but those were terms that were used up until recently. Um, but that's all it is. I mean, they even have an app where you can get with someone and have sex. They have an app. You can pull up your phone. I just find this completely gross and fascinating that you can have an app and it's got the people's picture and I guess there's a little bit of a profile or whatever. And if you want to meet that person, you swipe left or right. I don't know which, but you swipe. And then if they agree and they swipe for you, then you meet up and you have sex, and that's all that's expected. It's not a dating app, it's a sex app. You can meet someone and have sex. Now, I won't argue the finer points of whether that's, ethically or moral, or in terms of values. That to me, it's not. But whatever. Um, it just amazes me that that's all that's expected, though. But for me, that's never been an interest. I always wanted to be married. I always wanted to have a deep relationship with a person. I was never interested in just having it be nothing more than sex. But in answer to BB's question, I would agree with Glenn that it's not impossible, but I think it's highly unlikely. What do you think, Jen?
I would say ditto for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right, moving forward. Do you feel loved in the relationship you were in? That's an easy one, Jen.
Oh, heck yeah. Yes, very much so.
Me too.
That was one of the questions?
Yep. Do you feel
Okay.
loved in the relationship you were in?
Okay, I see it.
What do you think, Glenn? Feel loved in the relationship you're in, my friend?
I think you already know the answer.
I do.
That's a yes in capital letters.
Okay.
All caps.
Well, that was quick and easy. I don't feel any need to go deeper into that. I think that's we've talked about our relationships quite extensively. So extensively? Did I say extensively? That's not a word.
Extensively?
Extensively, I think, is the correct word. Anyway,
Is this next question repetitive?
okay, let me read it. What difference would it make if love were a major part of the equation rather than other techniques like anger? Yeah, I think it is. We'll move past that one. What does circling back to love look like with ourselves? Okay, this is a fair question. So in terms, and I know Glenn's going to have a problem with this. He doesn't like the circling back, even though he believes that we live on a circle or we live on a ball, but that's okay. He doesn't like it. He can't twist his mind around to answer the idea of circling. But in terms of the question for us, what does circling back to love look like with ourselves? Jen, you have to circle back to love with yourself.
Come on, Jen. Come on, Jen. You wrote this.
I'll go
Come
first.
on. Oh, Cripps sees jumping in because he loves you to let you off the hook.
Sure.
I'm using him as a tool. I'm just kidding.
Ouch. Cripps, Cripps, do you feel used?
I do not. I never feel like I'm being used. Not ever. Not for a single second. I really,
Aw.
really don't. Because Jen does a really good job of showing me in many different ways, not just acts of service, but by her words, her touch, her kisses, and her friendliness and
All right,
kindness.
rated G.
Bloody
Yeah,
hell,
rated
Cripps,
G.
Cripps, over the top, man.
My face is on fire.
Jen's, you got a red face, Jen.
What did
If
I
you haven't-
say? Kisses
I'm under
and-
the table. I'm under
Is
the
it
table.
kisses?
I thought, oh my goodness, can I come under the table with you, Jen?
Oh my gosh.
Jesus, like you prudes.
Yeah. I didn't say anything,
Oh, it was good mushy.
mushy. Okay, mushy. It was mushy. Sorry.
It wasn't rated R or anything. Don't worry.
No, I'm not. I am not worried. I'm fine with who I am, and I know that I didn't do anything.
There you go. You're being
horrible.
authentic.
He's got self-esteem.
Yeah, he does.
My friend John says, "Did she just sneak in calling you a tool?"
That's what I heard, John.
Oh no, you guys! Now y'all throwing me under the table.
I miss John. I haven't talked to him in a while. I need to get on the phone with him and see how he's doing. He's a good friend of mine. Haven't seen him in a while. He actually came to Charlotte a number of years ago. He was on a flight. I forget where he was going. I think he was going to Illinois to visit his ex-wife. I think that's what it was. And he had a layover in Charlotte, and I went and picked him up, and we talked. And that was the last time I saw him. I haven't seen him since. I enjoyed seeing him. I always enjoy seeing him. So hopefully we can catch up sometime. Anyway, okay, so we did I was answering the circle. How does it feel when a person, wait, Hold on. How does it
What does
feel?
circling back to love look like with ourselves?
Yeah. What does
I think,
circling
yeah,
back to love look like with ourselves? Now, I love what Glenn said. So if you're in a place of love uh, toward yourself in the first place, there's no need to circle back. And I do agree with him. I was trying to make the point to him that if that's there, of course you're correct. You don't need to circle back anywhere. What we're saying is that a lot of people aren't aware how to love themselves. I think that's clear from all
yeah,
these broadcasts that we've done. We've been trying to hammer this point out that how important it is to love yourself. And again, not in a self absorbed way, but just in a general, not being codependent, caring for yourself, not giving up parts of yourself for someone else, but putting your own mask on, taking care of your own needs, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we mean when we talk about this. But if a person doesn't know how to do that, I think what it looks like is learning how to love yourself. And then there's no need to circle back. But that can be a process. And Jen, I'll let you answer, but I would say, just from my perspective, you've had to learn this.
yeah, I have.
You've had to learn how to love yourself. And before you learned how to do that, you did circle back. You had to remind yourself, hey, I'm important. And this happened many times. You would in certain situations you would have to remind yourself that you're important and that your feelings matter because you were not treated like that. That's just my
Yeah.
opinion from the outside. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll share an example with the chat. So from what I've been through, like the abuse that I went through and just all of that crap, I've had a lot of sadness, random sadness come up.
Mhm.
And because it doesn't match what is happening in my life currently, it is very unnerving and weird, and I don't like it. And so I've had these moments where I'm learning how to allow myself to feel those feelings,
Right,
despite the fact that it feels weird. But
right.
there are times I'm crying in Jason's arms, and I'll say to him, "This is what's wrong with me, like
Mhm.
what's going on," and he has to remind me and help me remind myself to have grace for myself and to remind me what I've been through, and it's totally normal for me to have sad feelings coming up randomly from past stuff, whether it's getting triggered or having some kind of emotional flashback or something.
Mhm. Yeah,
So that's a really good example of circling back to love with
yeah.
myself, just showing myself grace and understanding,
Mhm.
because my entire life, emotions have not been okay. I have not been in a safe environment for emotions to be okay, being felt, being shown, being shared. And so, my go-to feeling with emotions coming up is to stuff, to hide it, to feel guilt and shame. And so, switching my thought process with that and telling myself it's okay to feel, it's okay to let
Yeah.
these emotions come up, whether I understand them or not,
Whether
is a
you understand, say that again, please, because I think that's extremely important.
it's okay to let the emotions come up, whether I understand them or not.
Yeah, perfect.
And that is showing myself love. It's showing myself that I matter. When for years I didn't matter to myself. And it's the whole reason I stuffed. If I would have mattered to myself, if I would have had some self worth and some self love, I would have recognized that allowing myself to feel human emotions
Mhm.
is normal. It's
Yeah.
healthy. It's a way of accepting myself and being authentic. Like
Mhm.
I just spent like 38 years not being in that place.
Right.
So that's my example.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so Glenn, I don't know how you're going to answer this one because of your issue with the word circling back. So, what do you want to do? You want to just move forward then?
Yeah, I'm having trouble with it.
Okay.
I'm just the only thing I can come up with is just like reaffirming what you know already.
Well, yeah, if you're in the place of authentic love, I'm trying to get you to think about a person that's not in that place. How do they get out of
Well,
it?
I'm
How
thinking,
do they fix that problem?
if you're not in that place, how can you circle? If, to start with, how can you circle back to it?
By learning?
I think it's a road. It's a road, but I don't feel it as a circle. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I don't know if this will help, but when
Well, that's a good point.
with like the show that we referenced in the beginning, the
Yeah.
whole story with Dr. John Delaney talking to a parent whose teenage kid got his girlfriend pregnant, and his definition of circling back to love was not heaping guilt and shame on them, and knowing that this baby coming into the world, he was encouraging her and her family not to heap guilt and shame into the atmosphere with this baby coming in to their family. And so I guess if you applied it to yourself in a way, it's not heaping guilt and shame onto yourself. Does that make sense?
Well,
Yeah,
I can certainly answer that.
One example, yeah.
Yeah, I can certainly answer the question. If my son had said, "Hey, Dad, I got my girlfriend pregnant," what would I say? That I would say, John, how can I help? What can I do for you?
wow.
Well, that would be the first thing. Well, you don't use recrimination with your child. That's for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
you
You
shouldn't.
well, you do the total opposite. You embrace them. You're not there to make judgments about your kids. You're there to be there as a confidant and a confidant and a parent.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that
Yeah.
respect, Jen, I'm more than happy to answer that one.
Okay. Great. All right. We're almost done. We got two more. The saying, we can be our own worst critic, is very true. I wonder why that is. Is this something we are taught? Yeah. Yes. If people were parents like what Glenn is describing, and they're not there to criticize or to condemn their children for what they do, but rather they're saying, "How can I help?" That to me is loving. It is the epitome of love. It is the total, all-encompassing definition of love, is being there for the person, regardless of what kind of trouble they got themselves into. Rather than criticizing, you're saying, "Hey, I'm not going to make a point. Obviously, you weren't ready to have a child, but here we are." And moving right into the, what can we do? What can I do to help you in this situation that you're in? But that's not what we see in the world a lot of times. I'm not saying there aren't instances of that. Obviously, Glenn is an example based on the way that he would answer that question. But I've heard more the other reaction is, I mean, this is why the person called in the first place, I'm assuming, and why he answered the way he did, because he knows that this happens, that there's a lot of guilt and shame. He's saying, don't use guilt and shame. Why would he have to say that if that wasn't a way that people react? He wouldn't. I mean, I I think that abortion is a big deal, at least for teenagers, a lot of times, because they're afraid of how their parents are going to react to the very fact that they're pregnant in the first place. Um, so this is a huge issue. And to get to the question, we can be our own worst critic, is so very true. I wonder why this is. I think, is it something we are taught? I think a lot of people are taught. I was taught. My parents were critical of me, and so I learned in some ways to be critical toward myself. It's something I've had to unlearn. I was
Yeah.
programmed by the world also to be critical. I mean, even report cards. I'm not making some point that there shouldn't be report cards. Um, I'm
Got it.
saying that they're guilting and shaming. I mean, I've had report cards that were very good, and then other times I've had report cards like, even the term, um, well, Jason gets along well with others, but he has trouble paying attention. Can that be phrased a different way? I mean, I'm an imaginative kid. Can that be phrased a different way? I mean, I think it probably could. Obviously, I can't go back and change anything. I'm just saying that society in general is pretty critical, in my opinion, and some parents are also critical. So I think that we learn it. I mean, I remember playing sports, and sometimes you get a good coach that was encouraging and things like that, and other times you get a coach that when you make a mistake, they point it out in front of the whole team. Like, what are you doing? Get your head in the game. Like, that term in and of itself implies that you don't have your head in the game, and maybe you don't. But there's a better way to do that other than using criticism, in my opinion. There are other tools that a coach could use, or a parent could use, or a boss could use to motivate a person other than being critical. But it is, in my opinion, something that you learn. We are taught to do that. And the reason why this is a phrase, we can be our own worst critic, is because it's true. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah. Which question are we on? We're on
Is
the
this
same.
critic? Is this something we're taught? I wonder why this is. Is this something we are taught? We
Yeah.
can be our own worst critic.
Well, I can relate with you, with having very critical parents. And then society. There's just so much pressure to be a certain way instead of, the mainstream, whether it's coming from parents or society, it's being taught to be our authentic selves, to be accepting of ourselves, to,
Right.
um, so I'm like you. I had to unlearn all of this stuff, all this
Right.
crap,
Right.
and stop being so critical of myself.
Mhm.
Because criticism of myself is one of the things that pushed me into trying to twist myself into a pretzel of what I thought the
Right.
world wanted me to be, what I thought my parents wanted me to be, what I thought my friends
Right.
wanted me, boyfriends, whatever. Instead of what a what a bunch of wasted energy. It's like,
Yeah.
uh, and then
Yeah.
that whole time, I think a lot of times when you think about life, I would have much rather have spent all of that time being twisted up in a pretzel, having spent that time getting to know who I was or
Mm,
becoming who I wanted to be.
sure.
But instead, it was just, and not that it was wasted. I learned a lot,
Sure.
from it. But still, it's just, oh gosh, there's a lot of energy expended.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Before we get to Glenn, I believe on Lord Jesus Christ said, first thing I learned about myself, acceptance of where I'm at in my broken reality. It scrolled up on me. Sorry. Acceptance of where I'm at in my broken reality, being patient, throwing shame back into the sewer hole where it belongs. Shame is a tool of evil. Agreed. And I'm
Yeah.
glad I read that before you retracted it, because that's a good point.
Very good point.
A couple good points in there. Acceptance is huge, and throwing shame back into the sewer. This is what Jen's talking about. Relearning what she was programmed to do that's not helpful. And I think that's a lot of us have been programmed by our parents, by schools, by whatever, to have this critical spirit, or to be shamed and have to do something to change that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Glenn? This is probably the last question because the other one has circle in it. So,
I was going to say before he answers, the whole circling back with Believe's comment, I just pieced it together for me. It really is like self acceptance. When it comes, this whole question about circling back to love with ourselves really and truly boils down to self acceptance.
okay, yeah,
So if that makes it easier.
sure. But this one, Glenn, is we can be our own worst critic. Is so very true. I wonder why this is. Is it something we are taught? What do you think?
Well, I can say that my parents never guilted me. They never said, "Hey, you're not as smart as that other kid," or "You can't run as fast as that kid," or "You can't kick a football, you know, as far as someone else," or "You can't
Right.
do this or that." No, I didn't get it. So I wasn't conditioned to it. So hence, I think it makes a huge difference if, as Jen said, 100%, that the role models that we're set are such a
Yeah.
huge sort of huge in the way that they're embedded in your mind. So
Yeah.
everything that you get that comes back to you, you keep. You would
Yep.
be tending to, if your parents criticize you, then you're going to criticize yourself unless you get out of it.
Yeah.
You got to break it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are our worst critic in many cases.
Yeah.
I just accept that I'm not perfect and I'm not the best at anything or everything, and
Sure.
well, I can live with that.
Yeah.
I don't need it. I don't need to be. So yeah, I
Okay.
mean, you
That's
said, is
awesome.
this something we're taught?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are taught it.
Yeah.
And you know what peer pressure's like? They can give it to you big time.
Yeah.
It's and they can make you so frame and self conscious that you don't
Yeah.
want to come out of the house.
Yep.
Right.
Not good. Yeah.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you. We got
Okay.
about we got 8 minutes.
Yeah, we're going to finish up. Okay, so many of us extend love to others easily, but when it comes to loving ourselves, which can take many different shapes, it seems harder to do. Last question. How much better would we be as people if we learned appreciation? Is that the word, Jen?
Oh, acceptance.
Acceptance. Sorry. If we
And this
learned
was more,
acceptance.
it was more of a rhetorical question. We don't have to answer this last one.
Okay.
Because I think that's an obvious. I think the world would be a better place if people learned self-acceptance and
Yeah.
self-love.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm with you. I think that we've covered this pretty well, and we went to a lot of different places that I think added to it, and I think we're good there with the time that we have left. Guys, thank you for being patient with the stuff that had to go on with the chat ending and having to set it up. We're going to have to find something else, and I just feel bad for Glenn because he's the one that's producing it, and yeah, I would guess that it's frustrating to have to change midstream and set it up again, and we definitely want to be able to find something that works for the whole 2 hours. It's just unfortunate that they're doing this, but it is what it is. So thank you guys all for being a part of the broadcast tonight. I, for one, am glad to be back and glad to be feeling better and glad you showed up tonight, all of you. You guys make it fun to do what we do, and hopefully this broadcast has been beneficial to you in some way. And we'll be back again next week. I don't know what the subject will be. Just as a reminder, we are doing the Tuesday night at 8:30 in our Discord. And as usual, for those of you that don't have it, I will just go grab the link really quick and pop that in the chat, and so that you can find it next week if you have interest in showing up. Anybody can show up. Um, just pop in there. And for those of you that haven't been in there before, on the left hand side in the Discord are the voice channels, and so all you do is click on that, and then we can have conversations in there if you haven't been there before. We welcome everyone to do that, and it's just conversation. It's not recorded or anything like that. It's just us get to know each other more and talking. Usually we meet for about an hour, sometimes a little bit longer if people show up. And if nobody shows up, we hang around for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll take off. So if you come in at 9:30, or I'm sorry, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there's nobody there. That meant nobody came. So we just went ahead and called it. So that's the case. If you know that you're going to come, shoot us a message in Discord if you're going to be a little bit late, and we'll wait around for you. No problem. Okay. All right. So let's say goodnight. We'll say goodnight to you guys in the chat. Again, thank you for coming. We appreciate each and every one of you. And as always, if you um, want to make a comment about the broadcast, you should put it in the comment section for us. If you have any ideas for topics moving forward, you can always shoot us an email. A lot of you have my contact information already, but my email for the show is truestorylive.crips at gmail.com. You can send an email there. If you have any messages for Jen or Glenn, you can send it to that email. I'll be more than happy to pass it along to them. All right, Jen, if you could say goodnight to the people for us. The people.
Good night. Good night, you guys. You are always so wonderful in the chat and always surprising with your points of view and just your opinions and even sharing your experiences. And we really appreciate it, guys, for being authentic. You are authentic selves. So Thank you. Have a good night. Have a good week. And we'll see you next Sunday.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Glenn, say goodnight to the peoples for us, please.
Good night. Even though my head's going around in circles, it's all good from here, and look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Glenn. All right, guys. Thank you for being a part of tonight's broadcast, Circle Back to Love, this year's Loving. Just as a reminder, you've got 2 links in the description if you care to take the time. You've got the one, John Deloney. I think that's his name. I'm not looking at it right now.
Yeah.
That's worth a listen. I think it's only like 10 minutes long or something like that, but he's got a good channel if you're interested in that sort of thing. So go check it out. If you haven't liked already, or if you're not subscribed to our channel, we would definitely appreciate it. And if you like this sort of content, um, tell people that you care about to come over and give us a listen and be part of the chat. Certainly, we've enjoyed everyone being here. So, like I said, we'll be back we'll be here on Tuesday at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time if you want to have a chat. Otherwise, we'll be back again at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. Thank you guys. I hope everyone has a great week. Until then,